In the Sutra from Mahayana Buddhism tradition, there is a statement, quote, reality exists only where the mind creates a focus. We are taught that reality is separate from us just like we see it. I am here, you are there, and a distance between us exists. We have thoughts, but they do not possess any power. The only power that there is comes from a physical action, an action that touches you, or an action that motivates you, like a visual or auditory stimulus. But other than that, we can do nothing more or nothing more can have on us an effect. That is what we are told, that what we say can have an effect, and what we do can have an effect, but what we think has no effect on us or others. You have to be a crazy person to believe otherwise. But what is truly crazy is that even after experiments that have proven the opposite decades ago, we still do not know about them. We are not familiarized with these experiments at all. We do not see them in our biology or physics books. We do not see them in TV. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is what is truly crazy. What I am going to show you are two experiments that scientifically prove that thoughts have a measurable effect on our DNA, a measurable effect on our reality. And at the end, I am going to show you that we are not spectators in this reality, but creators. Let me show you the first experiment. In the first experiment, the scientists took the air out of a vase completely to create a vacuum. Even though a vacuum implies that there is nothing inside the vessel, in reality we know that there are some particles of light called photons that remain in this vessel. And the question for the scientists was, where are the photons? How are they located in the vessel? After their observation, they saw that the photons were in random positions. The experimenters observed that these fundamentals particles that compose the atoms, that compose the substance that we are made of, were in random positions in the vase as they expected. Fundamental. Now we come to the exciting part of the experiment. These brave scientists whose way of thinking is as extraordinary as the result itself put human DNA inside the vacuum. They did this to find out whether or not DNA affects photons. Or in other words, they wanted to prove whether the substance that we are made of, DNA affects the substance that the world is made of, photons, to see whether there is a connection between us and reality. And what they found is that the photons that previously were in random positions followed exactly the geometry of the DNA of the random photons. The material that the world is made of were influenced to follow the shape of the DNA, the material that we are made of. And the conclusion that the scientists ended up is fascinating. Quote, we are forced to accept the possibility that some new field of energy is being excited by the DNA. End of quote. In 1995, scientists concluded that they were forced to accept the possibility of this effect. They do not say that it looks like it or it appears like it, but they are at a point that they have to accept what they found. To summarize the experiment, we now have scientific proof that showed that our DNA has an effect in our reality. Let me show you now the second experiment, which was published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration in 1994. They begin the experiment by extracting DNA from the umbilical cord of a baby. Then the DNA is encapsulated in a vessel, and that vessel is encased within another vessel to make sure the DNA is not influenced in any way. After that, the DNA is put near the field of a beating heart. From the HeartMath Institute, we know that by measurements that they have done with their instruments, that the human heart produces an electromagnetic field. This electromagnetic field ranges into a distance of 8 to 10 feet or from 2.5 to 3 meters. This electromagnetic field has a specific frequency that changes based on our emotions. Now, as we know, human DNA in our cells is coiled in different ways. What scientists found was that the human DNA, when was in the presence of a human heart, would be altered. In other words, human emotion can affect the DNA of another being. Even though there is an effect of emotions to another person's DNA, the effect varies. If the human heart is in the presence of negative emotions, the effect it would have on the other person's DNA would be different from the case when the heart is in the presence of positive emotions. And by the heart being in presence of negative or positive emotions, I mean that the person whose heart is near the DNA is having negative or positive emotions. If the person would be experiencing negative emotions, his or her heart would affect the contained DNA coil to tighten. And when DNA coil is tightened, it prevents the DNA from expressing its function fully. And those functions can be immune response or anti-aging hormone, etc. So, We see that negative emotions tighten the coil and prevent the DNA from doing its function fully, and that can lead to sickness as a result. But when the DNA was in the presence of positive feelings, such as grace, success, love, and appreciation, for example, the coil would loosen and relax. And this would allow for a full expression of the function of the DNA, which relaxed so much in the presence of positive emotions that it would start to unwind as if the DNA would start to reproduce itself. This would result in a healthy body. But I also want to say that the functions of DNA do not just make you a sick or healthy person, but also choose which kind of hormones you produce or not. So, the other person's feelings can affect the hormonal system, or simply said, your emotions. But this does not mean that you do not have any power over yourself. It merely shows that they can come into your field of electromagnetic energy and can try to interfere with your system. And if you are weak and feel what others feel for you, think of you, and project to you, you may end up taking those reactions as yours and end up admitting that you are now a new personality, a new version, a new gender, or a new identity. People can become victims of this society in this way. It has happened before and can happen again. This is why I want to bring awareness to your environment, to not become victims of society, but to ascend above them and then pave a new and better way for others. Let's go back to the experiment. The experiment proved that someone's feelings can affect and change the shape of the DNA outside of them. And they can affect the DNA to express itself fully or not. And so beautifully, science complements our social life. This makes us aware that the thoughts that we have for people around us can affect them literally to be better or worse. And just for those who don't know how feelings or emotions are produced, let me show you. Thoughts signal neurons in the brain to produce chemicals to flow in our body based on the thoughts that we have. And those chemicals that flow inside of us are what we call emotions. So, what we think can affect other people. And let me show you what the scientists of the experiment said about the experiment. Quote, individuals trained in feelings of deep love and appreciation were able to intentionally change the shape of the DNA, end of quote. And they went on to say that human emotion produces effects that defy conventional laws of physics. It encapsulates beautifully our power that we in our best can defy the laws of physics. From our experiments, we come in a result that what we feel that is created by what we think can alter not only our DNA, but also the DNA outside of us, and that DNA can alter the material that makes the reality. Shortly, we can say, what we think affects our reality. Or better said, what we think creates reality. Now let me tell you a statement that I told you before, and that is the sutra from Mahayana Buddhism tradition. Quote, reality exists only where the mind creates a focus, end of quote. And we know now that we truly are participators in this reality, and not just spectators. We have power over our reality. We are connected to everything and everyone at a particular level. We have an effect over what we see. And clearly that is what the experiments proved. Hopi was at service, and somehow my materials have expanded your consciousness a little bit more about your abilities and power. I leave you, my friends, in the love and grace of one infinite creator.